Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host Brett Murphy, and for today's video it is going to be another movie review. And as we continue down the road to the release of Ghostbusters Afterlife, I am going to be reviewing Ghostbusters 2016. So Ghostbusters, or Ghostbusters 2016, or Ghostbusters Answer the Call, whatever name you decide to go with, was the 2016 reboot of the Ghostbusters. This time around we had Paul Feig in the director's chair in an all-female led cast that starred Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, Leslie Jones, and Kate McKinnon. And this movie was absolutely surrounded by controversy before its release. Essentially, there was just a ton of backlash because it was an all-female led cast. So there was people screaming about that, and then director Paul Feig was firing back at the backlash, and it was just this big, dumb, stupid blow-up for really no reason at all. But today we are going to be looking at the movie itself 5 years after the controversy, and that will not at all be the focus. So let's just jump right into the positives. And the first one, right out of the gate, like the previous two original movies, the cast chemistry here is insanely good, like superb. And that makes sense because they are all Saturday Night Live alums. Some of them actually are still on the show fairly frequently. But don't get it too mixed up, because chemistry does not equal good characters. By chemistry, I mean they mesh well together. The blend is there. They can play off of each other's jokes and quips and whatnot, so it feels like they're real life friends, and that translates well to the movie. The characters, on the other hand, well, Kristen Wiig plays Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy plays Melissa McCarthy, Kate McKinnon overdoes it a little bit from time to time. Sometimes she can be pretty funny, but there are definitely moments in this movie that I'm like, you're doing it just a little too much. And quite to my surprise, Leslie Jones was actually the standout. And I say quite to my surprise because I don't really love Leslie Jones's brand of comedy. Like, again, her SNL skits, they're hit or miss with me, and I was really surprised to find that she was actually my favorite of the movie. The next positive for this movie is actually the fact that it has way more creative ghost design and just way more ghosts in general than the previous two combined. The ghosts that need bustin' are very, very unique, and much more unique than anything we got in the first two movies, and for that I commend them. They really went all out on the designs here, and I actually found them to be pretty creative. The next positive that I would like to address is that the score of this movie is actually surprisingly very, very good. We have the relatively unknown Theodore Shapiro as the composer for this flick, and I was really surprised. I was absolutely vibing with this movie's score. It blends a bit of new, a bit of old, and it really worked for me. Another big positive for this movie is that it has a ton of color, which adds so much life, which is kind of punny now that I think about it. Considering this movie is littered with ghosts, you'd think it would look pretty dead, but no, there are bright greens, bright blues. When they're catching the ghosts, you get giant streaks of orange and red, and it really does add a lot of life to this movie. The next positive that I wanted to address is that the cameos that we get from returning actors are just a nice little treat. They don't overstay their welcome, they're nothing too serious, they're just nice, you know, they warm my little heart. And the last thing that I'm going to say here that might actually be kind of controversial depending on who you ask, but I actually found the final act of this movie to be much, much better than either one of the final acts from the original two movies. There's just a lot more going on here. I mean, it is quite literally the start of the apocalypse. We get to see the Ghostbusters actually in action and do stuff, and it's cool and it looks really awesome. And the fact that the final big boss was not the Marshmallow Man this time, they actually do make a reference to that with a giant balloon, but instead it is their logo come to life as a giant scary monster, and I thought that was actually pretty sweet. But now we get to the negatives, and the first negative in this one is that Chris Hemsworth and his character are unbelievably stupid. Like, way too dumb to even be a real human being. Some of it can be so stupid it's kind of funny, but for the most part, I just shake my head, and I feel like it was a total waste of Chris Hemsworth in this movie. The next negative, and it is a big one for me, is that the movie is really not that funny. Like, none of the comedy really landed with me. Sure, a few throwaway jokes here and there did make me chuckle a little bit, but for the most part, it's pretty unfunny. And with a movie like this that relies so heavily on its comedy, I found it to be really childish, and it didn't connect with me at all. And the last big negative that I want to address for this movie is the main villain. He's just this sort of weird loser loner dude, and I found him to be utterly unmemorable. At the end of the day, this movie is more of a mixed bag than I would have liked it to have been. Sure, the cast chemistry is great, the characters are hit or miss, but I think it has a great variety of ghosts and very creative ghost design. The score I found was surprisingly very good. There's a lot of color in this movie that really brought it to life. I enjoyed having the original actors back in some capacity in these little mini cameos, and I actually found the final act to be super enjoyable and actually better than the final acts that we got in the original Ghostbusters movies. But sadly, the movie's biggest issue is that its comedy is completely unfunny, and this movie relies very, very heavily on its comedy, even more so than the original movies, and because the comedy didn't really work for me, it brings down my enjoyment quite a bit. And I guess the note that I could end this on is by saying that I've only seen this movie twice. Originally when it dropped in theaters back in 2016, and my rewatch for this review / the ranking that I'm going to do with all the Ghostbusters movies, and both times I gave it the same score, and that is a 6 out of 10. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my review. And while you're down there, feel free to let me know what you'd like to see me review next. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you. And while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.